to continue with what he was saying on ancient Egypt and how it relates to the black populations, he will now expand. Now, everybody knows that because of images like this, there must have been other people of other places inside of Egypt. And this is what he will expand on. Of course, this hits a problematic thing for some because some believe 100% of the ancient Egyptians were black, which is not true. And some believe that 100% of the people in Egypt were Middle Eastern, which is also not true.
Okay. On the northern part of Egypt, okay, it was bordered by the Sinai Desert. That was their northern border. They had fortresses there. They did not allow anybody to come into Egypt.
Okay.
And on the western, the west, it was Libya. On the southern, it had the first cataract. Okay. But now, but the point is, we are not okay. That's not a debate here. I mean, that's not the topic of who was in Egypt. Okay, many races were in Egypt.
So you were talking about the 26th.
So you can see here, he basically says what I said before, long time ago, which is there's a lot of acceptance by people who push the idea that ancient Egypt was a black civilization, that there were actually multiple races in Egypt at any given time, and that if you do DNA tests, some people will come back with Middle Eastern DNA, or even perhaps in some cases European, or even further than that. That is not the question. The question is, what was the primary population that gave birth to the Egyptian civilization? And the reason why they want to go with the furthest, most hard to defend position is so that they can call you an Afrocentrist, so that they can do all of that and then throw you to the side. And then people will compare you to people like Hebrew Israelites and people like that, which he will bring up soon, if I remember the debate correctly. And that's basically how this whole thing works, which is you pick the weakest arguments and then you argue against them. And then anytime someone brings up something that's very important that could change the conversation completely, you ignore it and try to find the weak. That's why they didn't react to anything he said when it's intellectual.
So you mentioned the 26th dynasty, how they didn't let a lot of people in, and that was because there was a great deal of opposition on all sides from the Assyrians and various other.
No. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that it was during the 26th dynasty when the Greeks started to come in, but before that they were not allowed in unless they were coming in as slaves.
Well, the Greeks were allowed in because they were the mercenaries that kept the Babylonians out for the Egyptians. So I'm wondering, does that mean that their descendants don't count? Or like, what exactly is your argument here? Is it that just because there was a mixture at some point during whatever migration or conflict event that occurred throughout history, does that mean that the descendants of those people no longer count as Egyptians or native Egyptians by any measure? Or what exactly is your argument here?
So that's a weird question, because she's asking, if someone comes from somewhere else, do they not count as a native Egyptian? And the answer is absolutely not. You can't be, if there's anything as native, which of course I'm not the biggest fan of that word, but if there is such a thing as the word native, then the people who were there before the others must be the native. So yes, the other people who come from elsewhere would not be considered native. If they mix with the natives, then they will have native DNA. But if they don't, then they're not native, as a lot of Egyptians who are in Egypt now are not.
Because it's very unclear to me.
Well, okay, now when we deal with different times in history, okay, we have different types of Egyptians. Okay.
Okay.
So you can we go way back. Okay, before the Greek dynasty.
Okay.
Okay.
The 35th. The very last dynasty?
Yeah, because the mercenaries that came in during the 26th dynasty, they were very few in number. I think it was like 30,000 or something like that.
Okay.
But Egypt was still being ruled by native Egyptians.
This thing that she's doing that she thinks is funny, saying okay the whole time, is so annoying, and it shows the type of character this person really is. Like, the person did not come to actually debate, and they had no real. It's just really, really annoying, because I'm trying to listen to what he's saying, but every now and then there's like a fly going, okay, I need you to calm down.
Okay, those native Egyptians, huh?
Which ones are we talking about?
Yeah, the 26th dynasty.
The 26th dynasty.
Yeah, the 26th dynasty.
Okay, but what about the other dynasties prior to that?
Yeah, the last dynasty was the 30th dynasty.
Okay. Well, 31st, if you count the Ptolemy line.
No, 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 no,
don't
no.
count
That's dealing with Alexander. Okay.
Well, that's dealing with your Ptolemy line, which kind of is
yes, yes,
Alexander,
yes,
kind
correct.
of not.
So Cleopatra is put into ancient Egyptian history, and to a degree, that's fine. Cleopatra is part of ancient Egyptian history, but she's not an Egyptian. She's not a native Egyptian. She's not a, by the way, when I say Egyptian, I don't mean the word they made up. You can say Kemet, you can say whatever you want. I don't actually care about titles, but in what I mean is she's not part of the native population of Northeast Africa, that area there, whatever you want to call that area. She's not native to that region. And so we should always look at it with a little bit of, we're not looking at a native population. And it was so different from the rest of the entire Egyptian line. By the way, when we say Cleopatra, we're saying one person, but there was a bunch of Cleopatras, there was a bunch of Ptolemies, there was a bunch of all these people. So there was a whole line of people. Their way of living was just so different that we should not consider them part of the ancient Egyptian lines, and they wouldn't be considered by the ancient Egyptians themselves since they're foreign.
Alexander never actually established a dynasty. It was, I believe, it was one of his generals that did.
Yeah, yeah. Ptolemy, not
That's what I said.
Ptolemy, but Ptolemy. That's his name, Ptolemy.
I said Ptolemy.
I'm saying it with a T. Okay. But back to my point. Okay.
It's funny how she already said Ptolemy, but then she was like, "Oh, it's one of his generals. I forgot what his name is." And then of course he said Ptolemy. Like, oh, I said Ptolemy. It's like you could tell that she's got some knowledge about it, but she just doesn't have enough to be in this debate.
Now, during this time, before the Greek occupation of Egypt, the Egyptians in Egypt were Egyptians of Egyptian origin.
So what about the 27th dynasty, which began with the Persian occupation?
Yes, the Persians.
Yes, they were very heavily influential during that time as well.
Yes, the Persians, they ruled Egypt, I say
25th and 27th, I believe.
Over 100 some years.
Yes, and the ancient Egyptians don't consider Xerxes and his father native Egyptians either, even though in their own writings they write themselves as if they were true pharaohs, but they're not. And the people who came before that as well, even some of the Nubians that took over, whatever.
Okay, and a lot of the Persians okay. Most of the Persians that were in Egypt, they were mostly soldiers.
Okay.
They were soldiers in Egypt, collecting tribute and just degrading Egypt and just controlling Egypt's resources. Okay, and
I gotta ask, because
he was answering your previous question about the Persians, and he's literally saying that they were basically draining the resources and then sending them to their own corner of the world, which, by the way, they did to many of the places that they conquered. And if, the Persians count as Egyptian for conquering Egypt, are they Indian because they conquered India? Are they also at the same time Yemenite because they conquered Yemen? They clearly don't belong to those civilizations. They belong to Persia.
This whole issue, remember, it started with, we were talking about on my video Nefertiti, correct?
Yes.
And Nefertiti happened to fall well before the dynasties that we're referring to, the 18th dynasty. So I'm having trouble seeing why we're talking about, well, first off, the first established dynasty, and then again with the 27th and 26th dynasties, when we should be discussing the 18th dynasty, correct?
Yes, the 18th dynasty.
Okay, so would you like to address that?
So basically, the reason why they're having this debate is because she made a video before showing the bust of Nefertiti, and then she claimed that Nefertiti was clearly a Middle Eastern or European person because of her bust. Now, he claimed that bust was fake and that you can see her real image on the walls. Unfortunately, in this debate, his computer didn't work well, so it took a long time for him to prove this, which sucks because we can see clearly that there's a difference between the bust in terms of color and shape and the real paintings. Now, even if you think that bust is real, it clearly doesn't represent the same color as the person who is on the walls. What's worse than this, of course, is that there are other versions of these images of Akhenaten, and Akhenaten and Nefertiti are clearly painted with the same color. Now, some people say that this bust was painted with the classical style of the pale skin that you'd normally see on the females. But the problem is, it doesn't make sense. Look at the difference in quality between the one on the left and the one on the right, and ask me if you think that these were built in the same era. The reason for this differentiation, as you can see here, that Nefertiti's daughter, who has the same images, now you can see this same thing that has been chosen in the other paintings is reflected here in the daughter of Nefertiti. And you can see that clearly the new style is even affecting the busts, but somehow it doesn't affect Nefertiti's bust.
Now, when we deal with Nefertiti,
Mhm.
okay, that bust that's in the Berlin Museum, okay,
Yes.
it was found out to be a fraud. It was
Was
a
it
hoax.
though?
Yes.
You know exactly who determined that it was a fraud?
There's an article, and I forgot the guy's name, but I can
All
pull
of
it up.
all of
Um,
the popular consensus within the art historian world, and especially within archaeology, is that that bust is the best visual representation of Nefertiti, with the exception of only two art historians. I believe one is named Henry.
So let's unpack why that statement is ridiculous. Well, first of all, you can't say as an art historian that one bust, is the best visual representation of someone. How would you know? How would you know if it's over glorification or not? You have to work on averages. You have to see what different people from different areas showed of Akhenaten or Nefertiti and how they portrayed them. And if you look at the era of art they're in, they invented it. Look at their stomachs. In Egypt, you don't get stomachs like that. Everybody is physically fit. The women look beautiful. Their bodies don't look alien like these people do. In the next bust, you see the stomachs again doing the same thing. And then, of course, you see this image that shows the real ones. Then, of course, it shows them in this alien form again. Then this Akhenaten photo again. And you can see here the difference between the bust and another stone representation. And then you can see another one as well, Akhenaten. Now, why am I saying that that's ridiculous to say that that's the best representation? Do all of those images even come close to what the bust looks like? In real life, the bust is a much more, let's say, finer version of all of those put together. Those other ones have extremely exaggerated features, facial features. The bodies are exaggerated. So saying it's the best representation is saying that because it's a departure from everything else, that makes it accurate. That's like if I found cartoons of, you know, Barack Obama. Let's use Barack Obama as an example. And all the cartoons portrayed him as a black man in a suit, right? And then we found one image of Barack Obama that was like well painted and everything, but it portrayed him as a white man. And then I went, oh, so Barack Obama was white because of this one image. It's like, but what about all the other images? Why are they portraying him like a black person? Now, of course, you can talk about the similarities between the busts in some ways, which, by the way, some of the things they mentioned was the fact that the ear is broken, but almost in the back area. The nose is not broken at all, even though this thing fell, which is weird. You can see that part of the head is chipped off. Again, very weird. But I'm not an expert in dropping or anything like that. I'm not even talking about any of that. I'm talking about if you look at this, could you not think that it just came out of a factory? There's a reason why this is in a museum. It's not because it's the best representation of Nefertiti. It's because artistically, it's a standout compared to anything that came before and after. Find me another thing in ancient Egypt. Since somebody made this in ancient Egypt, find me another thing in ancient Egypt that's this level of art. This is beyond what they could do. This is Fayum levels of painting.
Stilin, and the other is, he's a Swiss, and the other one is a German, I believe. His name is Orden Isina. But all of two art historians of the many other ones that exist have made that claim that it is a fake. And off the backs of these two individuals, you can safely claim that it's fake.
So I don't want to go into this argument, but that's like an appeal to authority. I'm talking about the evidence. What does the evidence say? By the way, look how round these people's noses are. Look how round their noses are. Look how long the things are. Look at the ears. Look at everything. Everything is made in such a specific way that you could not look how round this person's head is. It's so ridiculous, this argument.
Okay, but do you know that
hardly a popular consensus amongst the community?
Okay, now let me first say that I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn about that bus. Okay, because I mean it's really nothing to argue about. I mean, because it's I mean, I know it's fake. It looks fake. I mean, it looks like it came, brand new out the package from Target or somewhere.
Okay. But, even though it's about 100 years old,
yeah, that's what they say. Yeah, that's what they say, but it can't be proven. Okay. But
it can't be proven.
The main thing is
100 years ago, or it can be.
Yeah, I mean, but the main thing is okay.
The problem here is that she's thinking that the thing came from whoever the people are saying that it's fake. No, it is more towards the fake side because it's a standout, and usually that's a good sign of faking. By the way, you have to ask yourself a question: has anybody ever faked anything in ancient Egypt so that they can get glory?
Okay, now the point I want to express to you is that there are images of Nefertiti.
Which images?
Besides that bust.
The image that you remarked about in my comment section, you said that she was described as a. Hang on, let me find it because I do have it here. You said the most original and accurate image of Nefertiti's is from her tomb wall reliefs that show here as a mahogany skin color and thick lips. Can you do you mind if you find that image and then send it to me, because I have an idea of which image you're talking about, but I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. So I can't actually determine whether or not I agree with you based on just your word alone. Yeah, do you have it?
Are you able to?
So something here is going to happen because I remember this part of the debate. She's going to try and think, well, she thinks that he is mistaking Nefertari with Nefertiti. Unfortunately for her, she doesn't realize that this guy knows the difference. I mean, anybody can know the difference because they're two of the most famous queens of the real ancient Egyptians, even though there are other queens in ancient Egypt. But these two are the most famous. And so he will not make the amateur mistake of thinking that these two are the same. But she is resting her argument on that. And you will see as she fails and then pretends that that wasn't her plan.
Donate $20.99. Thank you very much, brother. I appreciate the support there. Hey, Radio, what difference would it make right now if what you are saying is true?
What difference would it make?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what difference? Well, I feel that that it will be less racism, and it will be less. It'll cool down the tension of both sides. So, I mean,
so one of these mindless super chatters asked what's the difference if the ancient Egyptians happen to be black or whatever. And the question is, first of all, let me first give you context. So the podcast that they're on, they talk about history all the time. But now that it's Black history, it's like, what difference does it make? So what really is happening is every time Black people talk about the history, it's always, oh, they're talking about Black people again. Oh, they're talking about this again. They're talking about Afro. They're Afrocentrists talking about African history, Afrocentrists. Well, if you talk about European history, then that would make you a Eurocentrist, then, if that's how it works. And all of this is basically what they're obsessed by, which is, if you talk about African history, you're doing politics. If you talk about European history, you're just doing history. So what difference does it make if you talk about African history? It makes all the difference. That's why history is so important to almost every single country that exists. I can't think of a single one that it's not. In fact, Europeans used to make fun of certain areas where they'd get and there was no writing, and they'd be like, these people can't even document their history. But as soon as you try and do history from a Black point of view, not even a point of view, if you try to do African history, all of a sudden it's, what does it matter? Let's just focus on today. Everything in the past doesn't matter. Let's focus on today. Let's do what's happening today. It's like, okay, so are you going to go to universities and tell them to cancel history as a subject? Are you going to tell them to destroy monuments from the past and let's just move on with the future? Is that what's really happening? Or does it bother you when black people start talking about their history?
But then again, you know, then again, it all depends on the individual. You know, we can post the facts all day, okay, but if you don't want to accept them, then it's not gonna make a difference. Nothing's gonna change. It's like we can go at it all day, but if you don't want to accept them and you just choose to, you know, to be your own racist, you know, your own racist stereotypical self, or, you know, you just choose to hate black people. I mean, because first of all, if you hate Africa and you hate black people, you're not going to accept any facts that's coming from me. I mean,
which is exactly what is happening. Of course, they're looking at it like, oh, we've got like a African conspiracy theorist person who's got no facts, is just going to say anything and blah blah blah. And yeah, basically he's 100% right. And this is why the word Afrocentrist as well comes into play here, which is, if you are already racist, if you are already on the camp of you don't support anything African in history, your point of view has already been mapped out by movies because you don't know anything about real African history. Even if you take the one where they call us blah 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 savages or whatever, they don't even know that history, right? So they're taking movies and then saying the facts that you're providing can't be true because I watched a couple movies about Africa and Africa doesn't look like that in the movies.
because I mean, it's just, if you're either going to accept it or not. So it's like, I really can't answer that question.
Here, I have some more questions for you. First of all, Max 15 through 10 pounds to say, okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. But Heron Mesk through $10 to say ancient Egyptians were more European than African. Groundbreaking DNA research on mummies reveal. I have a link for it.
I usually skip these super chats, but I want to remind people that the DNA test that happened in 2017 that revealed that some of the people in the Fayum had Middle Eastern DNA, some Middle Eastern DNA. They also had African DNA, which was completely left out in that study. They had low levels of Black African DNA, but they had them, and they basically put it out there like, oh, they have 100% European DNA. And then they revised the articles and then they said they had some Middle Eastern DNA, which is closer to European DNA than it is, which I don't even know what that means, than it is to Black African DNA. And then they came back and read the actual study rather than just writing articles where they try to make Africa look like it has nothing to do with ancient Egypt, and said they had a low level amount of Black African DNA, which the question is, where'd they get the DNA, the Black African DNA? If there were no Black people in Egypt, where did they get that low level of DNA in the Fayum areas? And it's pretty simple what's happening. By the way, those people were actually foreigners that they were testing over there in that region, but that's another story for another day.
I know the study.
You know the study?
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's
Did you?
that's
Did
going
you
back to
happen
what I
to-
said.
Did you happen to find that link yet to the image?
Now, while he works on the link, I'd like to read an entry of Wikipedia over the allegations over the authenticity of the bust. The bust of Nefertiti.
By the way, the guy who's reading right now is actually a scientist in real life. And I want to remind you of the people who always say never use Wikipedia, that scientists, historians, all of these people use Wikipedia. I'm not saying trust it, but it's a good place to go and start information. You can't, it's literally an encyclopedia of knowledge. And then it's also like using ChatGPT or whatever. If you're going to use it, don't take it as the Bible. Just use it as a way of sort of pointing yourself in the right direction. Now, obviously, what he's about to read here is whatever. It's an opinion, but let's see.
Fraud in Egyptology. That was a book by Henry Sterling. And Wikipedia writes, Dietrich Wildung dismissed the claims as a publicity stunt, as radiological tests, detailed computer tomography, and material analysis have proved its authenticity. The pigments used on the bust have been matched to those used by ancient Egyptian artisans. The 2006 CT scan that discovered the hidden face of Nefertiti proved without doubt, according to Science News, that the bust was genuine. Dr. Zahi Hawass said, Sterling is not an historian, he is delirious. Although Sterling had argued Egyptians cut shoulders horizontally, and Nefertiti had vertical shoulders. Hawass said that the new style seen in the Nefertiti bust is part of the changes introduced by Akhenaten, the husband of Nefertiti. Hawass also claimed that the sculptor Thutmose had created the eye, but it was later destroyed.
So I'm going to replay everything that he said, and then I'm going to give Henry Sterling's arguments for why these things revealed the way they did. And then, of course, we're going to see why a lot of what they're saying doesn't make any sense. And of course, they want this bust to be part of ancient Egypt because it is magnificent. It is a sort of beautiful image if it is related to ancient Egypt.
Fraud in Egyptology. That was a book by Henry Sterling. And Wikipedia writes, Dietrich Wildung dismissed the claims as a publicity stunt, as radiological tests, detailed computer tomography, and material analysis have proved its authenticity.
So he gets into the materials that basically were there. And we will get into what Henry Sterling said. But first, let's get into what he says, or what Wikipedia says.
The pigments used on the bust have been matched to those used by ancient Egyptian artisans.
So the person who discovered the ancient Egyptian bust said that they discovered it with paints and stuff like that. And so he had free paints, and also he could compare to other ones that were already painted. And so when he made this, he made it with old paints that were there in ancient Egypt. And so the dates and even the materials given make sense that they are the ones that were freely available to the ancient Egyptians.
2006 CT scan that discovered the hidden face of Nefertiti proved without doubt, according to Science News, that the bust was genuine.
So for those of you that don't know, there was a CT scan done on Nefertiti's bust in which they found an inner core made of a different material, which showed Nefertiti non-symmetrical. It showed bumps on her face. Basically, it showed what was typical in that era of showing the flaws of the people. And then over it was this bust over here, which basically was perfect, and it's called the idealized face of Nefertiti, which is hilarious if you consider the fact that that girl earlier mentioned that art historians say this is the best face we have of Nefertiti, when we literally have a face inside of this one that shows that there was a less realistic one which was consistent with the rest of the busts of the age. As we read here, using CT images to study a priceless bust of Nefertiti, researchers have uncovered a delectably carved face in limestone in a core and gained new insights into the methods used to create the ancient masterpiece and information pertinent to its conservation. According to the study published in April issue of Radiology, we acquired a lot of information on how the bust was made and manufactured more than 3,300 years ago. Another author, Alexander Halpert, MD, directed the image science. We learned that the sculpture has two slightly different faces. We derived from interpretation of the CT images how to prevent damage of this extremely precious art object. Nefertiti, the wife of the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten, was the most renowned great royal wife of all 31 Egyptian dynasties, considered one of the greatest finds of ancient Egypt. The bust of Nefertiti was discovered in 1912 during excavation of the studio, blah, 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 blah. The Nefertiti bust consists of limestone core covered with a layer of stucco of varying thickness. The bust was examined using CT scans, first time in 1992, but recent advances in CT technology allowed the researchers to analyze the statue to with greater precision. So this is basically what they're talking about. And you can see, again, like I mentioned, it's hilarious when they say this is the best image we have of Nefertiti. No, it's not. No, it's not, because it doesn't even reflect the art style that existed in the day. And according to them, it's less realistic than the one that they have underneath it, which has bumps and pimples and stuff like that, and that revealing the face of Nefertiti. And this is not even, I'm not even saying that one is real. I'm just saying, based on what they're saying, it's not even real. Also, idealized, meaning that it's not real. The face is not exactly what it is, even in color. We get to the point, of course, where we can look at several different ones, and almost none of them are built in this way at all. In fact, I can't think of a single one that is built in this way. And not only are they not built in this way, but they show the flaws on the outside of it. There's no idealizing. They're all brown. Here are a few examples from the Armana period of real ones, real busts that were made. And you can see that there is just a sharp difference. It's like that one is a standout from every single one that exists.
Zahi Hawass said, Sterling is not an historian, he is delirious. Although Sterling had argued Egyptians cut shoulders horizontally and Nefertiti had vertical shoulders. Hawass said that the new style seen in the Nefertiti bust is part of the changes introduced by Akhenaten, the husband of Nefertiti. Hawass also claimed that the sculptor Thutmose had created the eye, but it was later destroyed.
So on the shoulders, you can see here, it's vertically cut perfectly on the shoulders. So look at the shoulder area. You can see that it's cut from the collar area. Now, he claimed that this is a sign that the bust is not the same as the ones made in ancient Egypt because they never cut the shoulders off. For example, multiple busts in ancient Egypt have their shoulders fully intact. And these shoulders that are show that yes, the people in ancient Egypt used to cut it only horizontally. But their argument, of course, is that it's part of the new introduction of how the thing works. Now, notice here that it's a smooth cut. It's not a cut that is mistaken or anything. If you look at some of the busts of ancient Egypt in the Amarna period, which is the period of Nefertiti and Akhenaten, there too, the busts still have the shoulders. It is without a doubt that the styles changed, but it seems like the only one I can find that has vertically cut shoulders are the one of Nefertiti, at least vertically cut perfectly. Every other example is cut in a different place, but it's still horizontal. For example, the head of Akhenaten, which, by the way, some historians haven't even agreed that it's a head of Akhenaten because they also think it could be the head of Nefertiti as well, because Nefertiti in some of the Armana things looked so androgynous and also looked so similar to her husband. But also, if this vertical shoulder thing happened, how come it didn't happen with these jars? So let me give the quick story. Inside of Tutankhamun's grave is found these canopic jars. When they found these, some people started to speculate that they are definitely Tutankhamun because of the way they looked. But some people started noticing that they have a feminine thing about them, that they don't look like males. Now, remember about the androgyny that I talked about earlier that can occur. But when comparing them, it seems very obvious that this is a female. But notice again how the shoulders are cut. Very typical for ancient Egypt. The idea that the new style occurred and suddenly they started cutting shoulders this way and that way, that is made up. That is not real. It doesn't make sense, or whatever other words you might like to use. Again, so they use three excuses. One, it's very unique. Two, it's idealistic in a typical way in ancient Egypt, which is like that already contradicts the unique thing. Three, it's part of the new styles that was introduced by Akhenaten, but it's the only version of that new style. How's that a style? So to put it in modern words, imagine if we dug up these images of Beyonce in a tomb from 1,000 years ago and we went, this is the typical style of ancient Egypt. And because of a new style that was introduced, suddenly they started painting her like this. And then we asked the question, okay, so did anybody else do simple 2D rotoscope version of anybody else who was buried back then? They go, no, it was the new style, but only one person did it, but it was the new style. I think we would all conclude that the rotoscope version was probably a fake and the oil painting versions were probably the real one. But in this case, it's like, no, it's the best, so we like it, and it's the one that has to be real, even though it makes no sense. There's no, by the way, can you give me a logical reason why they would cut off the shoulders? It makes it so difficult to balance. Remember, the shoulders are not just there to act as just nothing. The reason why you can cut it that way is because it makes it very, very easy to balance. Why go this far and then, of course, never do it again when you could do this and have the shoulders be balanced themselves? By the way, I challenge anybody to find one where the neck is that long of any ancient Egyptian. It's not even like it's like, oh, there's a slight departure. No, the neck is too long. It's weird. The shoulders are cut vertically. That's weird. Now you might be asking, well, why would they do it wrong when they could do it right? Well, it's because they were copying this image of Nefertiti. So they looked at this image of Nefertiti and her neck is long on this image. So you copy it, but you don't realize that this is just a painting version. You need to copy the busts, not the painting.
So it seems that you're fighting against a bunch of doctors who prove their stuff using CT scans, looking at the inside of the bust, showing that the pigments that we use today are similar to those that were used before radio.
Well, I mean, well, that's their opinion. I mean, this like I said, it's all opinion. I'm saying, but it is opinion that is not supported by historical reality.
Radio.
Now, those
It most certainly is opinion. We cannot claim that this is a fact, and it isn't supported by historical document at all.
Reading is an opinion.
Yes, it is.
Okay, just
He said,
make.
he said it was CT scans. Hang on.
Well, they radiocarbon dated
Yeah, CT
the
scans.
the pigmentations though, because I actually have read through that, and they have radiocarbon dated the actual pigmentations to determine whether or not it was pigmentation used during that specific time period during the 18th dynasty.
So yes, they did radiocarbon date it, but the thing that she doesn't know is that the people from back who discovered it had paints freely available, and they made other versions of replicas, testing the paint out, meaning that if you took those other things as well that they used for the paint to see how, basically they were testing how the ancient Egyptians used the paint, you would also get the same date. But we know that those ones are not from back then as well. These were discovered in the workshops of the Amarna period people, which were discovered by Ludwig Borchardt, who discovered all of these, and he said that these were the training wheels of the later busts. In the spirit of the ancient Egyptians, he started creating his own versions of these busts, and also he has an entire book where he paints using the paintings or the paints that he discovered in the workshop. One day he pops out with the head of Nefertiti, who is just as pale as he is in this enhanced image, and basically the rest is history.
We got
Sorry.
No worries. I'm just going to throw out some more. John Wayne, 1488, says, when will these Black Kangs learn that their people had no extraordinary individuals in their population, and the pharaohs, and likely the average Egyptian, were a Turkish population?
Isn't that hilarious? The fact, firstly, they throw racism, which is whatever, but then the funny part is now they're moving to Turkish. It's like, are they Middle Eastern? Are they Bedouin? Are they every single group is accused of being ancient Egyptians except people who live in Egypt. They're like, oh no, it was the Bedouins who started it. That's why they're dark skinned. And then they go, oh, wait a minute, it was the Turkish who started it, which is hilarious. Others say it's the Mediterranean, others say it's the Greeks, others say it's the whatever. They choose even the other side of North Africa or whatever. They'll pick anything as long as they can say it's anybody but the ancient Egyptians.
What do you have to say at that shot? Radio. He's throwing swings at your
Okay.
people. What are you gonna do?
Always
Now, first of all, okay, people who say that,
Uh-huh.
they they know absolutely nothing about the history of Africa. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now, we go into Mali. Okay, Mali, Ghana. We had a Songhai Empire. Okay.
Are we talking about Egypt?
They always.
This woman is so steeped in racism that she doesn't even realize that he's trying to correct the idiocy of the question. The person literally asked, why do Africans not realize that they had no civilizations? And he's trying to show that there were civilizations, but she doesn't care about that. She just cares about criticizing him no matter what he says, because she doesn't care about what he has to say.
Well, the person that asked the question was asking about sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, he wasn't talking about Egypt.
I thought, all of Africa is kind of, I don't know, we're talking about Africa with regards to everything being interconnected, right? Or no, because you did bring up Sudan when we were talking about Egypt.
I hate people like this who can't sit still for like 5 seconds while somebody said, this guy said like 3 words and she jumped in.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That the ancient historian that goes by the name of Diodorus Siculus clearly said in his book 3, book 3, chapter 1, that the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians were Ethiopians. Okay, they were Ethiopians.
Isn't that just an opinion as well? Or?
No, that is not just an opinion. Okay, because it's that's what the ancients were saying. Okay, now what the ancients were saying and what people are saying today is totally different. Okay, that's why I tell you that I do not go by this DNA nonsense. Okay,
that is actually a very important point outside of her being mental by what she's doing, but the important point is, again, all the ancients write something different about what is actually going on in Egypt and who the Egyptians are, and all of that writing is then dismissed. Think about how often they use Greek and Roman writing to like prove their point, like, oh, the writings never said that, or the writings didn't say that, to prove their points about something, whether it's infanticide or any of these things in the past, when they accuse certain tribes of things and they go, well, we need to go and look into the details. Did these people have democracy? Let's go look into the details. Let's go look at. And then when it comes to the ancient Egyptians, it's like, no, ancient people are it's just their opinions. They're lying about Egypt. They're just telling lies. When they connect it to Sudan, that's them lying. It's like, how come they're useful in so many ways, but then when it comes to Sudan, all of a sudden, or Egypt, all of a sudden they're just a bunch of liars?
Because it's a bunch of made up nonsense. Okay, first of all, okay, when we deal with these DNA tests, okay, why is it they always come out with some bogus results? Why is it
an example of a bogus result?
Where the silly claim that King Tut was Western European. Okay, how can you prove that historically?
About it?
Huh?
Do you recognize that there can be truths that are not recorded by history? And I have also another question for you. How long do you have to wait before an opinion becomes an historical fact?
Damn, they're throwing like 7 different questions at the guy. He's really getting at them. He's really hitting them. They have to now pile on and make all these silly claims. By the way, it is a silly claim that Tutankhamun was Western European. That's not even the real claim about Tutankhamun. The people who claim that he has some Middle Eastern DNA, firstly, they said they haven't even got his full DNA, but the ones who claim that he had some Middle Eastern DNA don't claim that he's Western European.
Well, historical fact is based the closest evidence to reach a historical fact is archaeology. Okay. If I say if you can't prove it with archaeology and ancient with a writing, and on top of that with writings or literature that's on that artifact, okay, then it's just a theory. It is clearly a theory, and theories are not good enough. Okay,
so
but
if I write a bunch of crap on a book, I write it with a pencil, I bury it, and it survives 3,000 years. Does it become more true in 3,000 years, or is it still a pile of crap?
So before he answers this question, notice how they've completely abandoned everything they were saying before in order to ask this silly question, which he answers in a perfect way, and I will explain why.
It is clearly a theory, and theories are not good enough. Okay,
so
but
if I write a bunch of crap on a book, I write it with a pencil, I bury it, and it survives 3,000 years. Does it become more true in 3,000 years, or is it still a pile of crap?
No, it's more credible than what somebody's saying today. Yes.
So you're going to
it
take
is
the
true.
words of wall drawings and pigmentations that
Look at the disappointment on his face when he realizes that he answered the question in a very interesting way. He said it's more credible, not that it's factual, not that it's real, but it's more credible than something someone made up today. And the reason why that's a very good answer is because if you go in the past and you write something that is, let's say, nonsense. So let's say they say we were created by the god paint and this god invented us. It's more credible in the sense that it reveals something about the ancient Egyptians in a truer way than just something you make up today. 100%. You don't have to believe it. You can go, okay, so they probably weren't created by that god. But if you look at the rest of it, you can still glean some information from it that is about the real life, like what they were using, what it was made of, that pencil, all of that is still going to be more useful than just something someone is saying today.
that tend to fade, that tend to not survive the test of time all of the time, or tend to get damaged through the test of time. You're going to take the words of people who lived 3,000 years ago over that of genetic studies done on those people that lived 3,000 years ago that are conducted hopefully impartially, and by scientists who have actually gone to school and learned and studied for a good long while enough about genetics to actually pinpoint those specific groups that kind of differentiate between whatever country of national origin you're from.
Well, isn't that a loaded question? It's a pretty simple answer. So are you going to take the thing written by ancients thousands of years ago about themselves more seriously than you're going to take people today who have already shown themselves to have a bias, to want things to go that way, who have been accused by other archaeologists, historians, enthusiasts, and other people of having a bias, of trying to prove a certain thing, who have already dismissed a lot of information about Africa, who say things that are absolutely incorrect, like there is no civilization outside of Egypt and Africa, or any of these things. Are you going to take those people's opinion more than you're going to take the ancients? Of course, you can take the ancients more seriously. Why would you trust those people's opinions? And then, of course, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, but the DNA, yeah, it's selective. The way they do the DNA is selective. Every single time they do it, it's like, oh, it's more proof that ancient Egyptians are this. By the way, they contradict themselves. They say the ancient Egyptian DNA that has been discovered is related to Western Asians, and it's also related to Europeans, but somehow it's unique to the Nile Valley. Is it unique or not? Someone has to explain that part. And then, of course, they don't talk about the fact that there are multiple migrations that happened inside of Egypt that would leave this type of DNA. And if that exists, then how do you know that the person is not a recent comer, right? If people are going in and out of Egypt, how do you know the person you just genetically tested is a recent comer versus a native who's always been there? How are you proving that part? Take America, for example. If I went to America and I went to any place in America, pick a big city in America, and I started genetically testing people, and I genetically tested 5 people or 100 people, there's a good chance that there's going to be some foreigners in there. There's a good chance that there's going to be some recent foreigners. So maybe not even that far back. Maybe 100 years, 200 years, whatever year you want to pick, but they're still foreigners. And then I genetically test them and I go, see, ancient Egyptians, ancient Americans all look like this because of these 100 people. What? Which, by the way, that's very close to the number of people that have been genetically tested in Egypt over a 6,000 year period. What makes it worse, though, is that when this debate was happening, they hadn't even found the others. They had, at that time, the 2017 study and the one with Tutankhamun, which of course they already found. The Tutankhamun study also showed that Ramses III had Black African DNA that only started in West Africa, which is why people talk about it all the time. And so already you're seeing diversity in a way that is reflectant of something like America as well. But then they go, oh, no. But they don't bring that up. They don't bring up the fact that the 2017 study also showed low levels of sub-Saharan African DNA or any of that information. So yes, I would trust the ancients over that.
Yes, I will take the word of the ancients over them anytime. Okay,
Okay.
because when they do a study on a mummy, okay, that
Okay.
mummy is dead. Okay,
Yes.
that mummy cannot speak for itself. Okay, the
Okay.
person that is doing the study on that mummy, all the saying is coming from him. Okay,
Okay.
and we know that you
I don't know why he's laughing, because it's actually a very simple thing, which is that people impose what they want to believe on mummies and on historical things. I mean, we wanted to believe certain things, and so we're almost blind to things in the past that we not only do we not want to believe them, but we don't even see them. For example, democracy has already been happening in historical areas since the beginning of time, but because we are blind to that, we were blind to that at a time when democracy wasn't the most favored form of government in the world. It only became apparent after democracy became popular. And so it matters what the person doing the study believes and thinks. That's why there's a section that's open for listing your biases in studies, which most people say we don't have any biases, which lets me know that they have a
people
bias.
have a reputation of lying. Okay, we
Who's
know that
hang on.
racism,
Who's you people?
Europeans.
Europeans.
Okay.
Okay, I'm an
Yes,
American.
Europeans.
That's
But you're
racist.
still
dude.
European
I
in
was
origin.
born
That's
in
racist.
America.
Your
That's
ancestors are still
racist.
European.
Okay.
Okay.
But
Ooh, that's racist. Of everything that's happened, literally they read a super chat of someone saying that Africans have never had any civilization, and basically they're saying that kings thing, and they're throwing all kinds of things at this guy, and now the racism has begun.
People have a reputation of lying. Okay.
who's
We know that
hang on.
racism,
Who's you people?
Europeans.
Europeans.
Okay.
Okay, I'm an
Yes,
American.
Europeans.
That's
But you're
racist.
still
dude.
European
I
in
was
origin.
born
That's
in
okay.
America.
racist.
Your
That's
ancestors were still
racist.
European.
Okay.
Okay.
But does
we
me
know
being
that you people
European make
have-
me hang on? Does me being European of European origin make me exactly the same as every single European?
Yes, pretty much.
It does. So what
Yes.
exactly are the traits of a
Get destroyed.
European Radio One? I'm just curious because you did bring this up before, and I would like in my comment section, and I would like to kind of hash it out a little bit. What does me being European have to do with anything? What does being European have to do with anything?
Being European has to do with anything. Well, first of all, you're white, like all other Europeans.
So what does
Okay,
that
and
have to do
clearly
with
that your ancestors came from Europe. Okay,
Okay.
are you denying that? So all of a sudden you're Native American now?
No, I didn't say that. What does me being European have to do with my credibility on anything?
Well, this is a problem. To be
Radio?
truthful, it has less to do with you. It has more to do with your ancestors.
Okay, what did my ancestors?
Radio, wait,
do?
but
You know
Radio,
more
you're
about it
saying
than I do.
that the scientists who are white or European,
Uh-huh.
their studies shouldn't be valid because white people have lied.
He's getting closer. What he's saying is European studies have been proven for a long time, and they were purposefully doing it in the 1900s and the 1800s and 1700s and so on, that they were purposefully changing information in order to make it suit their worldview. And so we should be suspect of how they operate today, and we should make sure that that bias, which we know exists, is rooted out before we can trust the studies 100%. But of course, they look at it like, oh, by the way, I'll say it again, of everything that was said in this video, to claim that that's the big racist thing, come on, calm down. Also, the other part was also hilarious, where she said, "What's me being does me being European mean I'm the same as everybody else?" The guy's like, "Yeah, it means you're white," which is absolutely true.
Well, first of all, I'm saying that their studies should be valid because it doesn't correspond with history. Okay,
But
it doesn't correspond with history. That's what makes it a lie.
What if
Okay.
a black scientist did it?
Would be credible?
Well, if it doesn't correspond with history, I still would not agree with it.
Oops, wait, he's making way too much sense. They have nothing to troll around, so they have to just listen, and now they're going to go back to trolling themselves and just be like, okay. And but when they hear something that sounds like it's going to get them in trouble, They're like, wait, slow down, slow down. Explain what you mean by this. And then, of course, when he explains it perfectly, they're like, okay, let's just go back to trolling and being weird again.
Okay, because even my people, okay, a lot of my people today here in America, they're claiming to be Hebrew Israelites, okay? And I do not agree with that, okay? I do not agree that we are the Hebrew Israelites, okay? And this is coming from black people, so it has nothing. With me, it has nothing to do with race. It has more to do with truth and historical fact. Okay.
So
Because I tell
earlier
them all
you
the time,
mentioned that white people are known to lie. Do you know that historians also lie?
Yeah, there's a lot of information happening there in one sitting. So obviously the Hebrew Israelite thing, a lot of, like I said, a lot of the people who claim that the ancient Egyptians were black, you cannot call them Afrocentrists, quote unquote, because they don't have the exact same views all together. Like some quote unquote Afrocentrists claim that Jews are black, but he clearly doesn't believe that. They also claim other people beyond that are black. These people don't even agree with each other, and you're putting them all in the same bucket. But we'll get back to that later. The question that JF asks is pretty weird, which is, do you know that historians lie? Yeah, he knows. He just listed a few, like the European historians that spent their entire life lying. He was actually not referring to every white person if they weren't being sensitive. He was referring to the European historians that distorted the truth for a long time. You know, the ones that claim that Nubians were white? Remember those ones?
Historians?
You do know that
pseudo historians lie.
Historical
You have
figures
some
also have
historians that tell the truth, and you have some historians that lie.
What if I told you that the white people you know have lied in the past were pseudo white people, and that the true white people, they don't lie?
Well, the belief that you have now comes from the racist pseudo white people.
What beliefs do we have, Radio?
Oh, he got back at them hard that one. They tried to troll him, but he came back. Yeah, the beliefs you believe come from those pseudos, since you want to play that game. He didn't just fall for the bait or get sensitive. Like I said, they're trolling to try to get under him, but he's not falling for it. He's just coming back, fighting as hard as he can.
To say, I mean, it might just be me, but I've known a few black people to lie from time to time. Not all black people, but many black people have lied, right? Humans lie.
There's still this issue of just
again, they're still triggered by the idea of racism. What he's basically saying is that the historians who were from Europe deliberately lied about the information of the past. And we know they've done it in several locations, like claiming the Great Zimbabwe was not made by Africans or any of these places. And so why should you trust them? Relating it to Africans doesn't make sense, because when did Africans lie and say in the 1900s at a large scale? If you take the majority of black historians, when have they ever lied and said that things that are from Europe were made by black people? Now, of course, there are small numbers of black people who want to claim that everything in Europe was as a result of black people or whatever, but the majority don't. Whereas at one time, the majority did within European universities.
Because I'm European, just because European does a study or whatever, there is a precedent set by their ancestors. What precedent is that, Radio One? I would really like to know.
The precedent of white supremacy that you are holding up right now by saying things like we were kings and all this other stuff. That precedent. The same precedent that didn't make you defend him when somebody said there were no civilizations in Africa, instead giggling and thinking that it's hilarious to say Africans have no civilization, meaning, by the way, that we're savage. It's just another way of saying that. And then you get super offended by him saying an accurate statement, saying that Europeans in the past lied. Yes, they did. But everything else was like, oh no, that was fine. But then when it came to this one thing, it's like, boom, stop everything. We've just reached maximum racism. Come on.
White superiority.
White superiority. So you know for a fact,
white is better.
You know
that's what I'm talking about.
You know for a fact that my ancestors practiced white superiority.
Unless they didn't come from Europe. If they came from Europe, then yes, that was the thing that they were doing back then.
Look, we're not just dealing with your ancestors, okay? This is not an individual thing, okay? We are talking about an entire race of people.
Yes, you're talking about all Europeans, correct? And how they're incredible because
I can't just group you as individuals when we have the whole entire race. Okay. For
Okay.
example, when you look on the Forbes list, okay, you look up the billionaires. Okay.
Okay.
What are most of the billionaires? Okay, if not all of them, what? They are white.
Why does that
Okay.
matter?
When you look up all,
This is getting a little bit off subject, so I will make a part 3 because I remember this part starts going into another group of people that I don't want to discuss in this video because it's going to get demonetized. So thank you for watching. Wait for part 3. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please comment, like, share, subscribe. I want your views on what you think on this debate and also how things haven't changed in a long time, because this is an older debate. Think about how much information that we think of, or some people think of as new, has been around for a while. Because this guy, by the way, has been on YouTube for maybe 20 years.